the Dog Trainer Podcast, episode
24.
Is it 24?
Yeah.
Hang on. I gotta confirm it. I'm losing track. We got too many. 24, yes.
All right.
Here we are. This is the second one this week. We did episode 23 2 days ago.
Yes.
So Josh and I were looking. We're like, what are we going to talk about today? We're looking around. We got a couple books here.
Yeah. What's this new one? I've seen
This
it.
is a book that was given to me for my birthday from my wife's mother. It's called For the Love of Dogs. So let me preface this with I have a strange fascination with coffee table books, right?
Okay.
I own a lot of them. Right?
Yes.
All sorts of miscellaneous ones, whatever. Listen, part of this may be from my my child idiot brain, but like when I was a kid, all I wanted to do was look at pictures and books. Mm-hmm. Coffee table books are notoriously pictures.
Yes, indeed they are.
I could pick it up. I could flip through every page in it and just look at the pictures and not read anything and get a general gist of what the book is intending to do, right? So whatever.
Okay.
So for like Christmas, birthdays, any sort of like gift-giving holiday, typically speaking, she'll find a book from somewhere. Typically speaking, she frequents like estate sales and stuff, right?
Okay.
So she'll find some books from estate sales and typically send me one. And we found some cool ones. Last time I was out there, two of my favorite ones that I have now are I went to an estate sale in Connecticut, and I found one on the history of Porsche, the company.
Oh, wow.
It's all just pictures of old Porsches. Very cool book. And I saw one that is Best of Life magazine. So it's like from like whatever, when Life magazine first started, and it's all of the best of magazines that they put out and the topics that were in it and stuff like that. So very good ones. Anyways, this book is called For the Love of Dog, Why Man is Dog's Best Friend.
Oh.
I haven't read this or anything. I don't know what this is about. Let's see. So this is by Tracy Ford, and this book looks to be a book. There's a lot of words in this. That's throwing me off a little bit. This is supposed to be for pictures. Here we go. So this basically is a book that just goes through and says, we're best friends because even amid confusion, he never lets me down. We both sleep well at night, knowing there is no limit to what we would do for each other. We don't mind cleaning up after each other.
Oh, God.
She hangs on my every word. I take notice when she has a good hair day. She doesn't hesitate to walk into a dark house in front of me. We can keep the same pace for hours. So anyways, it goes on and on and on, and there's some like cute, funny little things, and pictures of dogs, and look at his little bone. Oh, giving kisses on the face. Oh, little Frenchie, real adorable. Whatever. It's a cute little book.
Okay.
That was gifted to me. So it's sitting up here just in case we ever get the spark to read some heartfelt stories on the podcast. Thank you, Beverly Minoski. I appreciate it.
Oh, gosh.
That is what that book is.
Maybe that's how many things do we disagree with in this book?
Oh, that's intended to be a little harmless,
I know.
heartfelt book.
Yeah.
Lady probably had a dog that just died, and she was just like, I want to put all my emotions into this book. It just came out with this.
Yeah.
So that's fine. Anyways, what's new, Josh?
Oh, let's see. Since 2 days ago, I sent a bunch of emails, DMs, mostly DMs actually, to restaurants. Haven't heard anything back yet, but
That's all right.
I'm trying to give some free workout for potential clients.
I think the cool thing, and we talked about this the other day, I think the cool thing that you're doing about this is where this is coming from is not just like I want to give out free work and do this and do that. Like the restaurant industry is coming off of like the hardest times that they've had in the last gazillion years.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they're either hanging on, right? They are gone, right?
Yeah.
Or they're now recovering and having a lot of business come in, but not able to like sustain themselves with it, right? So like we got to find some balance in that industry, I think. And what you're trying to do that I think is really cool is you're essentially trying to like give back to an industry that has helped you out a lot over the last 2 years as you've started to dive into this and essentially re-provide back for them.
Yeah.
Right? To try to help them continue to grow and stuff, which I think is great.
Yeah. Because if they fail, I have no future business at all. So I would love to help out. So I guess this is a shout out to anybody out there that has a restaurant that listens to us.
Out there.
Yeah. Please hit me up at joshdobeyproductions.com. Fill out the email form and I'll get right back to you.
Right back to you.
Yeah. But other than that, I was supposed to go to Cloak and Dagger later today, but they're not going to be done until Monday now.
Really?
Yeah. Old construction woes.
That's it. Got to pour that concrete.
Yeah. I don't know if it is concrete. Maybe it is.
He said that they were pouring the concrete for
I guess like the base of it.
The other day.
Probably, I guess. I don't. Yeah, because I thought they were going to do wood, but maybe you have to have like a concrete base probably. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure.
Who knows?
Man, we have been just fucking jam-packed with lessons like every freaking day. Like it's just been one after another after another. And you know what? The last couple of days, I wish I had a notebook on me like while I was in the lessons because there have been some like really interesting topics that have come up like in the lessons we've discussed. Yeah. That I was like, shit, I want to talk about the podcast. Shit, I want to talk about that on the podcast.
Yeah.
I need to start like carrying like one of these little notebooks in me, like in those lessons for that. Because there's just been like, it's interesting, right? So like I've gone through waves of, doing lots and lots of lessons, like super jam packing myself, doing like 8-9 a day for like a month straight, 2 months straight, stuff like that. And then I've gone to being able to hit a point where I do like 1 or 2 in a day, and then do all of my other things that I need to do throughout that day and stuff like that, right? And it's so interesting when I go back to like the full bore, and I can see the contrast, right, where when you're doing one after another, after another, after another, there's a couple of interesting things that come up, right? So first and foremost, you start seeing the range of types of dogs, types of owners, and types of problems that come in, right?
Yeah.
So I could see the contrast of like literally I can go from 1 hour working with a 14-week-old puppy that's just fine and we're teaching obedience to and stuff like that, to a super freaking nervous, insecure, scared dog that is having reactivity or aggression issues, to the unbelievably hyperactive cattle dog mix. We've been having tons of those come in lately. And so on, right? And then the types of owners that have them, right? Like the low-key, chill, just like trying to get training people. The more, quote unquote, no offense, high maintenance people that are very, very, very active into their dog, want to like just super intense kind of people with their dogs, right? Where we're working on a lot of like, hey, like let's slow it down a little bit, right? And teach them to kind of, be a little bit more of a calming presence for their dog, right? And like, and then you have the more shy people and this and that. And it's so interesting to see how they all piece together, right? The types of dog with the type of owner with the type of issue, and see the correlations and how we then go about addressing those problems, right? Because like, no matter what that combination is of those 3 different things, because those are kind of your 3 variables that you have, the interesting thing is that, and this is why, everybody wants to do assessments all the time, right? We talk about this. We talk about this numerous times, right? Everybody wants to do assessments. But in the end of the day, I don't need to meet the dog, right? Like, I need to see as we start training. Like I say a lot, we don't do assessments because anything I'm going to need to know about the dog, I'm not going to learn until I actually start training them, right? Which is true to an extent. The only thing that is in addition to that is I need to see how everything responds as we start training, right? I need to see when I start that training process, how does the dog, respond to some of the basics, which is honestly the least important part of the process, because no matter what the dog is, the training process is literally exactly the same, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting. I was talking with Krista the other day, and say we get a new board and train that comes in, right? We have them fill out a general questionnaire just on kind of their major issues and major goals and this and that and problems they've had at home and stuff like that. And I'll be honest, probably we read that over day 3, day 4, something like that, because no matter what that thing says, the first things that we do with that dog are always going to be exactly the same.
Yeah.
Right? So that's almost the least important part of the process. The most important part of the process is how does the owner jive to and respond to the training that we're doing.
Yeah.
Right? Like how do they, as the dog is put in positions where they're uncomfortable or they're put in positions where they're confused or don't know what to do or push back on the training and stuff like that, right? How does the owner respond to that? And how do I then provide information to them that's going to help them understand that process better? Right?
Yeah.
It's really interesting. So the assessments, there's just nothing that we would get out of it. That's why our training programs are so simple, right? We literally have 4 options, right? And honestly, I think that's going to go down to 3 options very soon, right? So we have our 7-session one-on-one program and our 10-session one-on-one program. And we have our 4-week board and train and our 5-week board and train, right? And everybody always asks, which one do I pick? I was like, it doesn't matter, right? I was like, I am not in a position to tell you which one to pick because it has nothing to do with me, right? There's not one of them that is required for your dog's problems, right? It's just what's going to fit your lifestyle the best. The board and train is not for the more aggressive dogs or the more anxious dogs or anything like that. The one-on-ones is not for the easier dogs or the less aggressive dogs or anything like that. It's just one way to cut the cake or another way to cut the cake, but they're both going to take you to the same end point, right? If you want to be an active part of the process and you have the consistency in between those lessons to be able to put in the work, go for one-on-ones if you want to save a little bit of money, if you have an inconsistent schedule, or you want us to do that heavy lifting up front.
Bless you.
Whew, I was holding that one in for a minute there. And you want us to do that heavy lifting up front, so it's going to be a little bit easier for you to jump into the process after, go with the board and train, you know? But it literally doesn't matter. It's just what fits your lifestyle the best as far as what you're looking for out of a dog.
Yeah.
Jesus. Get myself wound up.
He's wound up.
Wound
He's
up.
getting excited.
Jesus.
Yeah.
You know, and honestly, then you get into the individual which one-on-one or which board and train. And from there, that's where it's more dog dictated, right? And the reason why I said it's probably going to go down to 3 program options because I think we're going to eliminate that 7-session program entirely here very soon. Just because the way I've always looked at things and the reason why we don't have all of these different program options and the reason why we took away the 4-session program that we used to offer a long time ago is because if somebody's going to sign up for training with me, I want to say, we trained the dog, check, right? Like there's nothing else I want to work on with this dog, right?
Yeah.
Your general foundational obedience that you need with your dog is accomplished, check. Right?
Yeah.
And the problem is the 7-session, the reason why people tend to go with it, I think, and honestly, we have very few people that do the 7-session over the 10-session just because the cost breakdown between the two, it's so much more cost effective to just do the 10, right? But the reason why people do it is because it's a cheaper option. Saves them a couple $100, you know? And a lot of times I hear it in people's voice when I talk to them over the phone. When they're, man, I feel my allergies just like flaring up right now. I don't know. This is weird. I don't usually get allergies, so this is strange times right now. So I could take like Claritin or something. But I hear it in their voice when I'm talking to them, and they're deciding between the 7 or the 10-session program. And the ones that tend to say 7 sessions, and this is not everybody, but this is a good chunk of the people that wind up wanting to do the 7-session, are the ones that are still just a little on the fence about if their dog really needs training or not. You know?
Yeah.
It's the ones that are like, well, we're really not having any big issues.
Yeah.
We don't really, you know, everything is pretty good. He already knows his commands and stuff like that, right? It's the people that aren't fully aware of the fact that their dog still needs training, right? That's why I want to eliminate it, because the way that our programs are set up is you're committing, right? You're doing the thing with us, and we're going to be there with you every freaking step of the way, and we're going to make sure that you get a freaking awesomely trained dog.
Yeah.
Right? So by having those shorter options and stuff, it kind of allows an easy way out for people with it, you know? So that's the reason why we'll probably wind up cutting that one. So then from there, you You either want to train your dog with one-on-ones or train your dog with board and train. There's no other alternatives, right?
Yeah.
And the only reason why we have 2 board and train options, like 4-week and 5-week, is because there are some dogs that come in for 4 weeks and it's like, we probably need an extra week with this dog. And with that, we make sure everybody knows that up front when they sign up for that board and train. And if we kind of determine that the dog needs that extra week, I don't want to say it's not optional because, if somebody says, hey, I don't want to do it, and they decide I no longer want to do it and they want to pull out, like, well, there's not really anything we can do about it at that point, right?
Yeah.
But for the most part, if we make that determination that the dog needs that 5th week, like, we're going to do that 5th week or you're just not going to train with us kind of thing, right? Because we want to make sure that dog is trained, right? We did it. We went from start to finish and we accomplished the things we went in to accomplish, right?
Yeah.
So where was I going with that? Why did I start talking about that?
I don't know. You just started talking about it, about how busy we were and,
how
cool it was to see the correlation of
correlation between the owners and this and that. And then we started digressing into the types of lessons that we do and all that good stuff. So that's been a very interesting thing to see as we've been doing all these different types of lessons. It kind of be almost like back in the grind with that, of just like lesson, right?
Yeah.
And it's been pretty cool. So that's been interesting to see. We've been jam-packed those lessons and stuff. We obviously got Matt in cruising with it. He's been so helpful these last couple of days, man. I mean, I've had a lot of lessons booked the last few days, and having him be able to just like step in and do like 2 or 3 of them while I get something else done.
Yeah, for
it's
sure.
It's just been like essential. Like yesterday, there were like 2 hours throughout the day that like he was able to just do the lesson. And I had we had a big staff meeting today. I had like all this shit I had to type up and stuff. And I'd like got it all finished, and I was like, oh my God, that's one thing I don't have to do at like 11 p.m. tonight.
Yeah, for sure. So when you're like in the shit with like 9 lessons a day.
The shit.
Yeah. In the weeds. At this point, can you like
in the trenches, I believe is the word I was looking for.
Yeah, in the trenches.
Yeah.
Can you like almost like look at a person now and be like, I know exactly what your problems are going to be. You know what I'm saying?
I like to say yes, but I'm going to say no because I think that would be me like stereotyping a little too hard, And I think that for as much as I think I'm good at that, there are plenty of situations where I'm not accurate with it.
Yeah.
I would say that I come up with like a mental picture in my head before I start talking to them of this is likely what's going on.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. Listen, there are some telltale signs that I could see that I will be able to predict it right off the rip. Like if I come down, like we have our lobby, obviously our little waiting area. And there are times I'll come down and I'll see dog just hyped and just like in like complete like spaz. I don't know what the fuck is going on around me mode. And I see the owner just petting and talking to the dog and just like the dog's like in their lap and this and that. And I'm able to look at something like that and be like massive fear and anxiety issues.
Yeah.
Right. Or, you got the obvious, the dog comes in and they're just completely out of control bonkers, spinning around from place to place, and reacting at everything and stuff like that. It's like, okay, probably a combination of like anxiety and reactivity issues.
Yeah.
Right. But no, I don't necessarily think from the owner just that I'm able to tell those things.
Yeah. Okay.
But as soon as I start talking to them, like we do phone assessments, I can get all that information from the phone assessment.
Oh yeah.
Like as soon as we start talking, like 5 minutes into that conversation, it's pretty clear what changes are going to need to be made.
Yeah. Yeah, I always like it when I'd be in the upstairs with you and like they'd be talking to you for 45 minutes. You get off the phone and it's like, I could have told them exactly what was wrong like 5 minutes into that. They didn't have to tell me this whole story.
Well, listen, and here's the thing, like with the phone assessments, I like doing phone assessments, right? Like we had this conversation with Michelle at Simeon Sid about assessments, in-person versus phone and this and that. And I completely understand why she likes doing the in-person ones, and I like doing the phone ones for the exact same reasons, right?
Yeah.
To develop that relationship with the client before we actually commit to a training program.
Yeah.
Right? Because she's 100% correct. Like there are people that we can just kind of weed out, talking to them on the phone where it's like, this is probably not going to be a good fit for you. Right? Yeah. Just based on commitment levels, based on expectations, based on the issues that they're having, things like that. Right? I just think like, if I'm going to call somebody and talk to them on the phone, that is my initial like sales process of getting that person comfortable with the things that we're going to be doing, right?
Yeah.
So if they want to talk my ear off for 40 minutes, you know, there are times where it's like, oh my God, like I have to go do other things right now. Like the conversation is just kind of spinning in circles. And like at this point, like we're not really accomplishing anything, obviously. But for the most part, if they want to give me the whole life story of the dog and tell me exactly what's going on and this and that, I'll listen to them. I'll chat with them about it. You know, I'll give them my 2 cents on it, and I'll provide to them also on my end. Before you commit, I'm going to give you a little bit of my knowledge to take and think about before you sign up for this training, so that you can trust the process a little bit more. You know, because there's a lot of people that I'll talk to them on the phone and they'll be telling me about certain issues, and I'll be able to talk them through why the dog is doing the things that they're doing, right? And I'm not telling them how to fix it or anything, but they'll get off of the phone having a better understanding of what's happening with their dog so that they can make a more educated decision on what they want to do about it from a training standpoint, you know? So I have no problem making those phone calls. I enjoy doing them. It's just very time consuming at times.
Yeah,
you know?
for sure. I guess another question I would have is, you know, I mean, they all, each the board and train and the one-on-ones, obviously the success lies in the person, you know, the owner. But how do you deal with, you know, because I feel like the one-on-one is so, like, it's so crucial that they do the work.
Yep.
You know, and they're keeping consistent on it. So, like, you know, and like you're putting your stamp, like Miracle Canine, on these people, but like, what happens when they're not like the full, you know, committed, like, and you can just tell, like, on the 6th or 7th, you know, day that they come in.
You, and this all comes down to, we talked about this with Matt when he was on early on, right?
Yeah.
Is finding what that client's motivation is.
Yeah.
Right? So, okay, if we hit a point where the client is coming in repeatedly, session after session, just like, I didn't use this, I didn't do this, I didn't do this, whatever, you know?
Yeah.
We need to, as much as I will put some blame on the client for that and say, like, you know, you do need to work on some of these things if I'm explaining to you why those things are important.
Yeah.
We need to also then get a little bit more micro as far as what things do you really need right now?
Yeah.
You know, do you just want to be able to walk your dog around the block? It's like, okay, cool. Well, fuck all this other stuff. I'll make sure the dog knows it still, but I'm not going to hold you to the standard of needing to do all of those things. We're just going to make sure you can walk your dog around the block.
Yeah.
You know?
I gotcha.
And I think we could always find at least one thing that the person really cares about that we can get them to put some work in with. And then listen, you have the clients that they're just not going to do it one way or another, you know?
Yeah.
And those are very infrequent ones, you know?
Yeah.
But you do your best, you know, and in the end of the day, with the one-on-ones, I know a lot of trainers will like almost use the clients not putting in the work as an excuse for the dog not being trained.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
I don't do that, right? So I'm not going to say that, wow, you know, your dog learning this bed command is contingent on you doing all of this at home. Because that's not the case, right? I can make the dog learn the bed command and be perfect with it with me in the course of those one-on-one sessions, right? Yeah. The dog may not do it for you at home, right, if you don't do the homework, but the dog will know what this is, right? So I'm going to check the box that your dog will know all of these things, right? If you... And that kind of protects my ass from the standpoint of, let's say we got, hypothetically speaking, a really awful client that just did nothing and just came in session after session, just doing absolutely nothing in between those sessions. And then they were like, you didn't uphold your end. You didn't train my dog. My dog doesn't listen. I'm going to sue you over it or something, right? It's like, okay, cool. Well, I'm going to make sure if that leash is given to me, I can get the dog to do every single one of these things to cover my ass from that standpoint.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm making sure I'm doing my part to train the dog, right? So that from there, at any point, if you want to utilize that training, you can do so. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can never say that you didn't do it, right? But like I said, I see trainers out there that they'll start something, like they'll start a bed command or something, and they'll be like, okay, cool, now you're going to do this at home with your dog, right?
Yeah.
And your dog's going to learn it over this next week at home. That's not the case. That's not the way I operate, and that's why I structure out the lessons the way that I structure them, where the first half of the lesson is me teaching the thing to the dog, making sure the dog understands that thing, and then from there showing the owner how to then use that thing, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not making these people be dog trainers necessarily from the standpoint of like, you have to actually teach this at home, right?
Yeah.
I'll teach it to the dog still. I just want you to learn how to use it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this is a good thing about like your price range and such, is that you're not overly expensive, but they're spending enough money that they've already like made most of I'm going to say 99% of your clients have probably already made that decision to be full committed by the time they put down their down payment or pay for the training, because that's a big commitment in itself. Like, you're already going this far. Like, I feel like most of those people they're 100% committed to making their dog better. So I think that's probably why you don't ever see anything.
100%.
So that was a good one.
Interesting topics. All right. Okay, cool. So what we're going to do today is we're going to keep reading through some books here, talking about some topics and stuff. And then we'll have some fresh new content for you guys. So I want to keep burning through this Good Dog book because we've read lots of passages here so far, and people seem to like it. So
that's what matters.
We're going to keep doing it. Thank you, Shawn Osheas, for giving me continuous content to have on my podcast. Appreciate you. All right, guys. We're going to start from the back here. All right. This is going to be our last podcast with this book. We're going to skip through all the middle stuff. If you haven't read it already, or if you like the stuff we've talked about, go pick it up on the Amazon. It's called Love Them by Leading Them, The Good Dog Way by Shawn Osheas. So this is the very end of it. This is just a good wrap-up, I think, where he kind of discusses some of the final thoughts on training that he has and everything. Okay. So we're going to get into this. This is called Dog Training 101. I know this might sound overly simplistic, but it's often super helpful to take complex concepts and find ways to turn them on their heads and make them as simple and accessible as possible. Whatever the training, whatever the issue is, whatever the behavior you're working on, this is the formula. If it's pulling on the leash, making pulling uncomfortable and not pulling comfortable. If it's jumping on people, making jumping uncomfortable and not jumping comfortable. If it's recall, making not recalling uncomfortable and recalling uncomfortable. How do you go about doing both of these depends on the tools and methods you subscribe to. But at the end of the day, this is all the complex, fancy training stuff distilled down to its most basic, tangible, and effective principles. Try it. We just had a shadow student here for 5 days of intensive training with me and the TGD team. We handled a bunch of dogs, all at different points of development and training, from totally green to beginning e-collar, and all with different attitudes, issues, and challenges. The thing I found us sharing with the shadow students more than anything else was the constant need for creativity. Not that she wasn't creative, she was, but even with a creative mind, it's still easy to get locked into protocols, blueprints, and methodology. Here at TGD, we have a definite training blueprint we use as guideline with all dogs that come through here. We typically start all dogs a certain way, move through certain phases of training in a certain fashion, and so on. But we're also super open-minded to shaking things up. Perhaps the most important part of being a great trainer is being open, creative, and solution-focused. The ability to deviate, to experiment, to totally jettison a usually successful technique or approach in favor of something better for the specific dog in front of you. As we were working with all the dogs, if she got stuck on some behavior or exercise, I'd say, try blank. If we were on pressure with e-collar and the dog was struggling to down with low pressure, I might suggest a quick tap instead of holding continuous, or a slightly higher level, or a slightly lower level, or changing her body position, or etc. So often the answer was off the beaten path. So often what worked was not what we typically recommend or teach. Sometimes it was the exact opposite. It was great for the shadow student to see how often the answer was something not in the standard playbook of typical steps or typical answers. This is what makes dog training so fun and so challenging. It's a great reminder for all you trainers and owners out there. Even if you've got a great step-by-step example or the perfect blueprint to getting a dog trained for whatever, even if you're following our DVDs, remember, stay super open-minded, be willing to switch it up, and if something's not working, try something else. Get creative, break some rules. The cool thing is, if it doesn't work, you could always try something else. Explore a little. You're not going to destroy your dog or his or her training with a little experimentation or even a mistake. But if you stay super rigid and refuse to deviate from a blueprint or protocol, you and your dog could remain struck and struggling. Struck and struggling? Stuck. I think he meant stuck.
Yeah, I think you meant
A lot
stuck.
of typos in this book. Sean,
Man.
where's your proofreader at?
Yeah. Who was your editor?
All right, let's talk about this for a minute. This is a good part here, right? So at this stage in Miracle Canine Training's training program, right? This is something I talk about a lot with our trainers, right? Because 90% of the time, right, same deal. We have a program. We just finished talking about this when we get dogs in for one-on-ones, for example, right? Or anything. We don't really need to read their questionnaire initially because our program we follow is going to be virtually the same no matter what the issues are.
Yep.
Now, that being said, even though we have a pretty strict blueprint, there are certain variations we'll make to it throughout the process, right?
Yeah, of course.
Because we have the variable of the dog and the dog's temperament and the dog's attitude and all those types of things. There are certain things we'll do that are not incorrect or might not necessarily not work, but because of the way that the dog processes the information, we have to change things up just slightly. And it's very interesting when I work with trainers. One of my favorite things to do is to watch them work these dogs and be able to look at, okay, cool, you're doing this accurately, right? There's not really anything that you're doing is wrong, right?
Yeah.
But if you just make this tweak in how you're walking or the way you're using the e-collar or the way you're presenting food rewards or any of these types of things, you could see the dog respond in such a different way, right? So talking about, when I was doing all these lessons, right, and I wish I had a notebook with me, we did a really interesting lesson yesterday, right?
Okay.
So it's this dog, Bingley, I believe. Bingley's this little mini golden doodle, and Bingley's pretty far through training. And Bingley was one of Emily's clients, and that I took over, and I'm kind of finishing out the program with them. And the dog was already very far through things. I think the dog was on like session 7 of 10, like when I took over. So he pretty much knew everything, right? And he came in, met with the owner, right? I believe Jenna is her name. And we sat down, we're talking, what's going on, this, that, she's discussing the issues they had, discussing that they're already very far through the program. She's very, very happy with the results. There's not really anything new that they need adjusted, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right?
Okay.
So we start working, and I was like, okay, cool. Well, I'm going to treat this first session kind of like an assessment. I want to see where Bingley is at with things. So I start putting Bingley through the motions and working on all of our basic commands, working through all of the isolated stuff. So I'm doing just bed stays, just down stays, just come commands, and I start piecing things together and stuff.
Yep.
And we noticed like 1 or 2 little holes in the training, right?
All right.
Nothing major, but just little things where it had been chalked up as she was like, yeah, we had discussed when we were doing the sessions, Bingley's kind of stubborn and sometimes he tests us and gives us a hard time with this. And I started pointing out, I was like, okay, cool. Well, I was like, everything looks really good. I was like, as I'm working through this though, like I'm not seeing a dog that's stubborn right now, right? I'm seeing a little bit of confusion with some of this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And we started isolating what the dog was getting confused about, why they were getting confused about things, right? And how we were going to make little adjustments on our end to work through some of that confusion, right? And again, this had nothing to do with any training being done incorrectly with the dog. It was just one of those situations where we had been following a program with this dog and following a protocol with this dog. And because we knew that we were doing it correctly, or her trainer knew she was doing it correctly, right? We kind of chalked it up as he was being stubborn, right? As opposed to looking at it a little bit more strategically and being like, okay, cool. Well, these are just tiny adjustments that could have been made to help with that confusion. So it was interesting. So that was our first session back. That was session, like I said, like 7 of 10 or 8 of 10 or whatever it was. And then we did our next one last night, right? So I told her after we finished that first session, I was like, okay, cool. I was like, I'm noticing some things right now, just some confusion, things I want to work through. I was like, it looks good. I was like, there's a couple adjustments to make. I was like, next time what we're going to do is I'm going to have you do all of this. I'm going to watch you do it, and I'm going to see if I could find the holes I'm looking for as far as why he's getting confused with some of this stuff.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So yesterday, and I use this as a great training example for Matt as he was shadowing the lesson as well, right?
Yeah.
Where we sat down and I was like, okay, cool. Now I'm going to have you do everything I did last week, right? So you're going to start with doing all your isolated commands. I want to see it. And we started, all right, bed stays. Just go do some bed stays. And I watched her do like 5 or 6 of them, right? And I'm just looking, I'm watching, and he's performing them well, right? Like Bingley is doing them good, right? But I'm noticing a couple little details. So I was like, all right, Matt. I was like, what things are you seeing right now that she can adjust, right? So he's like, all right, let me, do a couple more. Watching them. We find 2 or 3 details, right? One was like picking up the leash and releasing too fast. One was being way too up on top of the bed when she was giving the command, and whatever, one other one or something like that. We made a couple adjustments to it, right? Immediately, bed stay started becoming more clear to the dog, right? Okay, cool. Now let's jump into some downs. Do your downs, whatever. All right, Matt, what do you see that's that needs to be adjusted? Same deal. This, right? Little adjustments, right? And we even clarified here. I was like, she's freaking awesome, right? I told her, I was like, we're really putting you through the ringer right now, right? Like I'm really nitpicking this stuff from the standpoint of like a training exercise for us, obviously, but also like at this point in your training, like if you like, she's a gung ho owner, right? Like she does the work and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I was like, at this point in your training, I was like, the more you could understand some of these little tweaks, the more long-term your stuff is going to be really, really smooth. And she was great about it. She made these adjustments. She understood it. And she even said by the end of it, she's like, oh my God, like there were certain details that you had me adjust that just like, it felt like a light was like turning on like in my head as far as like understanding some of these concepts a little bit better, right? So whatever. So we're doing the session. We make these adjustments and we kept doing that with each command. Right. And it was so interesting as we worked through that and we were able to pinpoint all of those little details and make those adjustments, how much more clear all of this got to the dog. And we started seeing that confusion just go away.
Yeah.
Right. Because for as much, digressing back here, for as much as we have this blueprint, right, this concrete blueprint, typically speaking, when we're making changes to things, we're not changing the actual blueprint, right? We're changing how we are implementing the blueprint, right? And as we change how we're implementing the blueprint, right, we see the dog understand more clearly.
Yeah.
Right? What was I going to say? We see the dog understand more clearly to the point where you understand that dog training, right? And using your dog's training and actually teaching things and stuff like that comes down to the delivery, right?
Yeah.
Look at it like a comedian, right? Like when they're giving jokes and stuff, they talk about the delivery all the time, right? How do you make it hit home kind of thing, right? Because I could say a joke. I could repeat a joke that I heard a comedian say to you, right? This is a weird example, whatever.
It works.
And I could just say it and like it could not be funny at all.
Yeah.
Right. But then when it's delivered in a way that it hits, right, where it's able to really break through, you know, it's a game, right? It's totally different, right? So it's our job to set our dog up for success through the training that we're doing by making sure we are holding them to a certain expectation while we're holding ourselves to an expectation as far as how we deliver information in a clear, concrete way, right?
Yeah.
And that's my favorite thing to do. We can get real hung up sometimes, and he even did this here, where he talks about e-collar corrections and changing and making it higher, making it lower, this or that. I so rarely find that that is the solution, right?
Yeah.
I so rarely find that it's a matter of we're not correcting enough, right? Or we're not correcting firmly enough or anything like that. I find that it's all of those little details and how we're delivering the information that we're giving that is the game changer between the dog being really fucking good and the dog being just pretty good.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So it's interesting. So you gotta be open to those adjustments, and you gotta always look internally at how you're delivering your information to see is there something that you could do a little bit differently that will tweak things and make it better. And I think that's what makes really good trainers really good, is being able to dissect that kind of stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're working with living things that, don't have any kind of communication coming in. They have no idea usually. So every case is going to be different for sure. Every person that you train is going to be different as well.
100%. All right, next page here. Own it. The dog owning and training world is unfortunately chock full of generously judgmental folks. People who will happily and without invitation share their opinions and judgments in regards to your dog, your training, and of course the tools you choose to use. I've met so many owners and trainers who have been shamed, blamed, belittled, chastised, yelled at, and even threatened for their training approach with their dogs. We've talked about smart, nice, conscientious owners and trainers getting some incredibly nasty stuff from those who don't approve. Critics who have been taking it upon themselves to determine what everyone else should and shouldn't be doing. And of course, at the top of the list of tools that are most vilified and nasty are the prong and e-collar. These tools are framed as being only capable of abuse. Tools that are used by cruel, lazy people, people looking for shortcuts, people that don't care about their dogs, people who are happy to blast or yank their dogs into good behavior. But the funny thing is, I've seen the exact opposite. I haven't seen the abuse, the carelessness, the casualness, the callousness. Instead, I've seen owners far more cautious and careful with the e-collar. I've seen owners constantly needing coaching to dial up, not down. I've seen owners apprehensive to give their dogs a firm pop on the prong collar and needing us to remind them it isn't going to hurt their dog. So how come these tools of abuse aren't being used to torture and ruin dogs? Why? Because most owners are really great people. They're caring, kind people who only want the best for their dogs. They're great people looking for answers and help. People looking for tools that will help them keep their dogs in their home, keep their dogs safe, and allow them to include their dog in their lives in a much greater fashion. But that's not what certain groups of people want you to believe. They want to convince you that only nasty, lazy, cruel folks would use these tools. That's the agenda. That's the message. If you're one of these committed, hardworking, caring owners who are working your rear off to have the best dog you can, to have the most freedom and fun you can, I highly suggest you own your tools and approach without apology. Ignore the ignorance. Ignore the shame and blame game. Ignore the haters and uninformed. Let the nastiness and ignorance fall on deaf ears. Don't you dare let these people bully you into feeling badly about how you train your dogs and what tools you use. Do your research, learn the skills, make your decisions based on proof and results, and then own it. Next step. Smack. Is your dog too smart for training? Relationships are real things. You and your dog have one. It might be healthy, balanced, and awesome, or it might be toxic, disrespectful, and disheartening, or maybe it's somewhere in between. Whatever it is, it's been built by your interactions, what you've allowed, what you haven't allowed, what you've asked for, what you've reinforced, who you've been, and how you've behaved. Everything you've done has been information your dog has used to determine your relationship. All this information has told your dog who you are and what role you wish to play in his life. It's also informed him about the rules of life, what is and isn't okay, what is and isn't expected. It's created the framework your dog makes all his decisions from. While trainers can teach your dog commands, manners, and what is and isn't acceptable behavior, your dog is simply too smart and too emotionally evolved to take that information as universal. Just like you know who means business and who doesn't in your life, so does your dog. Eventually, if you want to keep up the work, if you start to slack, your dog will see the cracks. He'll realize that there's two sets of rules, the ones he knows and the ones you actually enforce, and he'll choose the latter. Not because he's a bad dog, but because he's opportunistic, just like you and me. Like us, when authority and rules are foggy and not consistently enforced, we tend to take advantage of them, whether we like to admit it or not. It's always consequences, or the possibility of them, that tends to keep us on our best behavior. The more predictable and dependable, the better our behavior tends to be. And of course, the less predictable and dependable, the worse our behavior tends to be. Our dogs are reading us all the time. What are we enforcing? What are we allowing? They're taking this information and deciding what needs to be adhered to and what doesn't. Who needs to be listened to and who doesn't. If you ask for less than what the trainer asked, you'll get less. If you ask for the same, you'll get the same. It's in these moments that you create your relationship dynamics. And while as trainers can build the foundation for the new, more healthy patterns and choices to stand on, it's only you, the person your dog lives with, the person who enforces the rules, structure, and expectations daily that can make these changes permanent. We can only give you the tools to start you on the path. We can't build the relationship. That part, the hard part, is up to you. Your dog is too smart to have it any other way.
We were just talking about that.
100%. That goes back to the conversation about I can make sure this dog will perform with me, but training really comes down to making sure that the dog understands the relationship with you doing those things.
Exactly. At the end of the day, you're the one that lives with.
It's true.
Doesn't live with David.
Well, and that's why, again, going back to our job is figuring out what things do we need to adjust the relationship with,
Yeah.
That's a hard balance because no matter what, even if we go in and I say, like we use the example of just walking around the block, and the person just wants to walk the dog around the block. If we just implement rules and structure there, it's still going to be good, right? But it's going to be much more difficult for your dog to believe you on the walk if you're not doing it everywhere else as well. And this is why we push for the whole comprehensive obedience approach and training approach and stuff, and making sure you're making these lifestyle changes everywhere, because no matter what, again, we have to leverage all of these opportunities everywhere so that the dog understands what's expected everywhere, right? Because say the dog gets away with barking out the window in the house and jumping on the fence outside and not listening when you try to get them into the house, and this and this and that and this and all of these other things. What happens is over time, as you go into these different situations, like say a walk, and you're starting to try to implement rules and you're trying to make sure you're enforcing it the same there, since your dog gets away with all these other things elsewhere, what's going to happen is they're still going to try to test you on that walk, and because you haven't leveraged those opportunities elsewhere, it's going to be much harder for you to enforce that walk in that situation, right?
Yep.
That doesn't make it impossible. It's definitely a case where you could still get there one way or another, right? But it's just going to be significantly more difficult.
Yeah. Maybe you should just be miracle canine relationship therapy therapists.
We're going to start, we honestly should start having just like a sit down, therapy session where people bring their dogs and we just talk about what's going on.
Yeah.
Listen, we're just going to sit here. We're not going to train the dog. We're just going to talk about things.
Dr. Turpak.
Dr. Turpak at your service. What can I help you with today?
Oh, God.
All right. Building confidence. Lots of folks ask about confidence building exercises for shy or fearful dogs. This can be a challenging endeavor. This is going to be a good one, I think, because we talk about this all the time. The concept of building confidence. Number one thing people, when they call this, I just want my dog to be more confident. I just want my dog to be less scared. This, that. I always talk about what are the problems you're having when your dog is not confident or when your dog is scared or anything. Because if you start with those things, you kind of sometimes have to accept the dog is the way that the dog is. And as we remove those expectations and we give more clarity, that will organically build a little bit of confidence. But still, the dog will be the dog, right?
Yes.
The dog will be the personality that the dog will be, right?
Indeed.
So look at the behaviors, not necessarily this stuff. Anyways, so much of it depends on the dog herself. How genetically sound is she? How much early exposure did she get or not get? All dogs can improve, but we might bump into some serious limitations. That said, there's lots of theories and approaches out there. Some subscribe to having the dog do challenging agility work. Some look for fear-inducing situations and work to slowly get the dog to overcome their concerns. Most do some form of obedience commands in conjunction with the above. Here at TGD, our basic concept is to get the dog to listen to the training rather than their fear, concerns, worries. I know that sounds simple when done in a very specific fashion. It creates amazing results. A very big part of the magic of this approach is our choice of tools, using an e-collar to teach, proof, and work dogs through trouble spots. Why e-collar? Especially with nervous, insecure, fearful dogs, because it is without question the most amazing tool for these dogs. Here's why. With other tools, the dog feels they're being forced to do the activity. This just creates more stress, more resistance, and more fear. With the e-collar, when done correctly, the dog feels they're doing the work. They feel they're recalling towards the scary person that a few minutes ago they wanted to run from. Are you actually compelling them to recall? Yes, but in the dog's mind, the perception is different. Same goes for other commands. Eventually, there's no leash or long line attached. The dog sits, downs, recalls, heels, all on its own. The e-collar is there to help if the dog gets confused or overwhelmed, but once again, the dog feels that she's the one finding the courage to complete the exercise. Many folks will want to argue with this approach, asserting that the dog is performing out of fear, but we have so many videos showing otherwise that argument is moot. I don't know what that word is. Some will ask, if the goal is to have the dog feel they're doing the work and humans aren't forcing them to do it, then why not just do food training? Good question, and there's a simple answer. True insecurity, nervousness, and fear are such powerful emotional states that food has no value. You could wave a steak in front of a freaked out dog and she won't want anything to do with it. So then what? So for us, the answer to building confidence is just our usual program, a program built on listening to the training and listening to the humans, performing commands without leash, and plenty of options to do otherwise, and having these commands being performed and proofed through ever-challenging levels of distraction and triggers.
Building towards non-negotiable commands, solid leadership, and using tools that make the dog feel empowered and confident is how we do our thing with these challenging dogs. All right, let me clarify a couple of things with this, because I agree with him, but I think he's wording it in a strange way. Yeah. All right, so here's the thing, right? Keep in mind this has nothing to do with the e-collar, right? He's making it seem like the e-collar is what's making the dogs more confident, right?
Yeah.
I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm not disagreeing that it is a highly beneficial tool for this kind of stuff and probably the easiest one to hit that point, but it's not the e-collar that's doing it, right?
Yeah.
The key with this is, I don't know if it's necessarily making the dog feel like they're doing it, but it's getting the dog to focus through their fears and insecurities. And listen, here's the thing, right? He said about the food training. Listen, if you can get the dog to focus in with food in these types of situations, that can be beneficial as well. But again, just like it's not the e-collar, it's not about the food. Because yes, there are situations where that emotional state that they're in is too insecure for them to want that food, right? So the key, I think, is looking at all of these situations and the things that these dogs are scared of as rational fears or irrational fears, right? I talk about this a lot as well. So 90% of the things that your insecure dog is going to be scared of are irrational fears, right? That trash can is scary, right? That loud noise was really scary. Those stairs are scary. This, that, whatever it may be, right? Because I know they're irrational fears, once I get the dog to perform this behavior on their own, so they make the decision to go do it, and they realize that nothing happens, that is what builds confidence, right? So you're teaching them to face their fears head on. And yes, the e-collar is a great tool for this because it allows us to be able to do it off of the leash, but you can do it with a leash as well, right? But you have to get the dog to actively be the one to make the choice, right? Stairs is a great example, right? We have 2 floors at our facility, and a lot of these dogs that come in have never seen stairs before in their life. They live on ranches, whatever. They maybe go up and down one little stair, you know?
Yeah.
So a lot of times you go to walk them up, they freak out. They want nothing to do with it, right? Guess what we do? We go up the stairs. We get the dog to move through it, and we don't have an e-collar in that moment. We just use a leash for it. Dog goes up the stairs. Wow. Oh, my God. We got up the stairs. Whatever.
Yeah.
We repeat that drill. We go up and down. We go down. Up and down. Up and down. Up and down. Whatever. Eventually, we hit a point where the dog's like, oh, okay, cool. These stairs are not doing anything to me.
Yeah.
I clearly can do it. I'm over that fear, right? What did we do? We built confidence, right? So the key is putting them in a position where they're forced to face a fear head on and getting them to actively make that choice to work through it. The reason why the leash or any of these other things don't work very much, I don't think it's because they're forced to do the activity, but it's because the dog is not consciously making the choice to do it.
Yeah.
Right? With a leash, if my dog is scared and I constantly just use that leash to hold them in a sit position, they're not actively making the decision to like, okay, I need to focus on this sit, right?
Yeah.
They're just being micromanaged.
Yeah.
Right? So that's a lot of the key with this one. All right, next one. Sleuthing.
Sleuthing. What is
I don't know.
Sleuthing?
We're going to find out. You can't get caught up in assessing a dog with just the current moment. So many owners and trainers tend to make determinations on the dog's intent, ability, and actions based solely on what's occurring in the moment in front of them. What the dog is offering here and now, but that's just a snapshot in time, and it can be super misleading. To be truly effective with dogs, you got to go deeper. You got to become an emotional, behavioral, and attitude sleuth.
Oh, sleuthing.
This means you take into account all the preceding behavior, all the past moments, and use all the information to help you determine what exactly is cooking. Have you seen pushy, snotty, tense, guarding, or disrespectful behavior prior? If you have, that doesn't live in a vacuum. It's part of the dog, and it's part of the dog's emotional, behavioral, attitude repertoire. The wise trainer or owner sees it all and factors it all in. They know to look for the big picture, not just the current one. They use that info to make wiser, deeper, far more informed choices. Choices that tend to take into account the entire dog. Of course, this doesn't mean that once the dog does something that they're always that dog. Specific factors and triggers in that moment could bring things to the fore, things that aren't necessarily permanent red flags, but you should always be in the back of your mind as possibilities, and information you use to get to the bottom of things. Dogs are both clever creatures and open books. They will inadvertently tip their hands in a moment, if you're looking, and then conceal that behavior or choice in another, crafty and obvious. What might look like: a dog comes in. I've seen video of him bullying his owners. Later, I see him try to blow out of the crate or through a threshold, or jump on me in a very specific way with a very specific flavor. Then, when I'm working with a dog on recall or place, I see the dog blow it. He keeps messing up some very simple training steps. Do we have a learning issue or do we have an attitude issue? Factoring all the previous info and being acutely tuned into the feel of the choices and actions taken will help you make an informed decision. But if you just look at the moment in front of you, you could be easily bamboozled. Confusion or choice? That's an important question you should always be asking yourself, and info you should be looking for. If you really focus on becoming sensitive to body language, eye contact, or lack of, the feel of the dog, and whether the dog has a clear head or lives in a state of overwhelm, and if you pair all that info with all the previous behavior shared, you should be able to get pretty accurate picture of the dog and what will best serve him. More reps or more accountability, backing off a bit or adding more pressure. Dogs like us have attitudes, desires, and agendas. And like us, if you watch them long enough, you'll start to see the truth. The cracks will start to show. The deeper, more nuanced, and sleuthy approach to reading and problem solving will just help make the very best decisions based on the entire dog, not just the moment. This brings up an interesting point. So, another lesson that I did yesterday, right? We were working with this, what were we working with? Australian Shepherd, I believe. We've had tons of these in, right? Doing a lesson at Edgewater. Same deal. Great owner. He's on top of the dog. Dog pretty much knows everything at this point, you know. And one of his big goals and reasons why he started training is because he wanted to be able to take his dog to the park around the corner from his house, and he wanted to be able to throw a frisbee off leash for the dog, right, and feel confident in that. And he was asking, I was like, all right, well, you know, she clearly knows everything. So, you know, why haven't you done it yet? And he's like, well, you know, I'm nervous that she's going to take off after a squirrel or a bird or something like that. We're talking. I was like, well, have you had that issue before with her? And he's like, yeah, you know, she used to chase down all of these things, right? And this is kind of the same as what Shawn was talking about this last post, but just a little different. Kind of sparked this.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, cool. Well, one thing that I look at always, right, when I'm working with dogs or when I'm working with my personal dogs, right, is I look at the past behavior that I've seen before, right? Let's take this example. Dog that has a past history of chasing an animal, right? Knowing that that is in the dog's DNA to go after and chase down this animal, the one thing that I'm going to make sure that I always do indefinitely for the rest of existence is make sure that in my mind, if today was the day that my dog decided to take off after one of these things, what level of accountability would I need in order to stop that behavior? And typically what I mean by that is what level on the e-collar would you need? And in most cases, that's extremely high. 90, 100, somewhere around there, right? So I told him, I was like, all right, cool. Forever, when you go off leash, what you need to do is have that scenario in the back of your mind, have your e-collar preset to be able to address that worst case scenario if it were to happen, and always go into that situation expecting it so you could address it if it happens, right? Because what I see is the opposite. Long term, as the dog gets better with things, right? Like this dog, when we were working it at Edgewater, was a cakewalk, easy, focused in, not distracted by anything, right? And because of that, we were working the dog at like a 20 or something, you know? But I was like, most people will look at this and they'll be like, this is how my dog is going to be all the time. So they have their e-collar set for those things. And then when they encounter these big situations that are less expected, they're not prepared to address it. And then they scramble and they try to turn the level up and their timing isn't good enough and they don't take advantage of that situation, right? I use the example of Vinny all the time I remember the one time I was playing ball with him at Tremont and Lincoln Park, whatever, throwing the ball, and he saw a squirrel, and for whatever reason, that was the day he decided he was going to take off after that squirrel, right? He goes running after it. I had my e-collar on high, told him no, probably tapped that button like 4 times. He came running back to me, and that was literally the last time he ever took off after an animal, like ever again. Like I can't think of like any other situation. You know, and that's because I was prepared for that scenario. I was able to take full advantage of that scenario, and he learned very clearly from that scenario that's something he couldn't do. Right? Most people never run into that scenario and are in a position to address it. Right. So if you've ever seen a particularly dangerous behavior out of your dog like that, you have to always expect it. Right? So that you could take advantage of it when it happens. Because it's not a matter of can we do all the training in a way where we avoid that issue forever. It's about we create the training, we create the expectation and the accountability so that when we see that situation, we could take advantage of it. right?
Yeah.
Now, where I disagree with Shawn with a lot of this kind of stuff, and this was my biggest reason I stopped getting into him a long time ago. Like I said, I love the way he pieces together information and stuff, but from a training standpoint, he's very hung up on tools and very hung up on corrections, I think, right?
Yeah.
Like we were talking about, like in one of the examples, how, you look at training, you make adjustments, stuff like that. I think most of his adjustments are that dog's being snotty, that dog's being bratty, just like we talked about with a client I was working with yesterday, where she was chalking up the dog's issues as the dog was being bratty about things, which was not the case. It was not a motivation issue. It was a confusion issue, right? Mm-hmm. And I've seen a lot of situations and videos and stuff like that he's posted of dogs where it's like he's talking about how bad of a dog the dog was, and how pushy the dog is and bratty the dog is and this and that. Where unfortunately, if you start falling into the trap of labeling every dog like the bratty, pushy dog, you start falling into this trap like he was just talking about, where you look at every situation that the dog is misbehaving or not performing, and you say the dog's being bratty, and then you start amping up the e-collar and giving higher corrections and stuff for that, as opposed to looking at, are there confusion issues right now?
Yeah.
And most of the time there is, most of the time, like, listen, a lot of that pushy, bratty stuff, you get past very quickly. Early on, you develop that relationship with the dog, and you get past those issues. You teach them what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. From there, the training is more of the patience, creative, consistent kind of process,
Yeah.
So,
No, I've definitely been in that situation. A couple of months ago, because we were on a hike, and we always have Bender off leash pretty much, and he's great. But there was that one time there was a chipmunk, and we weren't prepared.
those damn chipmunks.
Yeah, we had him at like a 20. It was not enough. And from there on, I realized, that you have to be ready for that situation, because that's the only situation that he's going to do that in, and he's going to need that higher correction.
Yeah.
So I from personal experience have screwed that up.
It happens.
Yeah. Yeah, but like I never even thought to think of it in that mindset that I mean, because I was thinking, oh, he's so good around people. Like if I say come when there's people coming, he's fine. We go walk past them, he stays in his heel. Yeah, everything. So the only reason I would ever need that e-collar is for his
big scenario.
Yeah, a big scenario,
100%.
and I have it just set for like a regular correction. So.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, right? Like, I'm not saying that in those scenarios there's not going to be a situation you have to give just a regular correction, right? Yeah. But the thing is, it's much easier in a normal, casual situation to be like, oh, hey, like, I need to stop him from, I don't know, picking up that stick off the ground or something. Yeah. To be like, okay, let me just turn down a little bit and then do it. To, holy shit, he's taking off after.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's much easier to do that in that scenario, right? And again, with my dogs, to this day, if we go off leash somewhere, their e-collars are set all the way up.
Yep.
As the precaution. Do not act up at this point, right? Like, you can't do that. Because, like, all of my dogs have had this situation. With Vinny, it was that case with the squirrel. With Vera, I remember one time, long time ago, this is actually very shortly after I started e-collar training with her. I was hiking in the woods, and we saw a buck in the woods. Same deal. Took off like a fucking rocket after that buck. Same deal. She got a nice big correction for that. I don't think she's ever really done that again since. Yeah. Right?
Exactly.
Deli, like we've had little issues with Deli and stuff with that as well, stuff like that. But you got to be prepared for those things.
Exactly.
All right, next one. Putting out the fire. Lots. Hang on. Get this goddamn microphone. There we go. All right. I hate reading with this microphone. I need to situate it differently, I think. This is what I need to do. This. There we go.
Oh God.
This is the move right there. See that?
Put your little thing back down though.
What?
Your fuzz. There you go.
All right.
Technical
this
difficulties.
Actually is the move. I think this is the way Jocko Willink does it on his podcast. Because I watched him read books and I wondered how he. Yeah, there we go.
There it is.
This is a game changer. All right. Lots of talk about the fallout from correcting dogs around things they're excited, worried, or fearful of. There's a lot of typos. He just went excited, worried, fearful of. Should be or fearful of.
God. How did all these get through? Sorry.
I think it's probably self-edited.
Self-edited.
Yeah. Self-published.
Yeah.
All right. The messages are built around the idea that you will create a negative association by correcting around one of these triggers. The real bummer is that these messages are so I don't know what that word is.
Ubiquitous?
Yeah, that one. Listen, English was my worst subject in school. I was real bad with it. I just never gave a shit. I didn't understand the consonants and this and that, the type.
You read so many books. How's that a thing?
I didn't get into reading until way later in life, though. I was not a reader in school at all. There were a couple books here and there that I would pick up and start reading that I really liked, like Chuck Palahniuk or whatever, guy that wrote Fight Club. He's got a bunch of books. I read most of his books, and I really liked those. But here's the thing: I could read it. I could sit here and read it, but I don't.
Yeah.
I don't understand all of the things in it.
Like ubiquitous.
Yeah, well, certain words. I mean, my vocabulary is not great, obviously. But from a grammar standpoint, I don't know what any of this is. I don't know how to properly use these things. I know how to read it,
Yeah.
I have to, fuck if I try to, write something out,
Oh, God.
Oh, man. All right. Where were we? So they're afraid to correct their dogs. Instead, they work to counter-condition and create positive associations through food and other rewards. There we go, back to this counter-conditioning stuff. We talked about this enough times. Yeah. What they're missing and not being told is that the negative association is already in play. That's why your dog is reacting. If there was no negative association, you wouldn't be seeing any of the issues. The other part they're missing and not being told is that you can't create a positive association while the dog is freaking out over the negative one. First, you've got to stop the negative reaction. First, you've got to correct and create a calm and more neutral state of mind. Then you can teach a new way to feel. Now, let me just clarify something else that Shawn Osheas is saying here. The people that are saying to counter condition are not saying to counter condition while the dog is freaking out.
Yeah.
They're typically saying that you work when the dog is under threshold.
Yeah.
And then you counter condition and gradually increase that level of distraction, right? So this is kind of misleading there, right?
Yeah.
That being said, I still obviously agree with Shawn from the standpoint of I want to put the dog in the scenario they're going to be making this poor decision in, stop that behavior, then go in and counter condition the actual response and try to create a more positive association.
Yeah.
So, sorry, Shawn. You have to block the old and create a gateway for the new. So the big takeaways. 1, correcting your dog around triggers won't create negative associations, but it will create the opportunity for new positive ones. I've trained too many dogs with reactivity issues and have yet to see this phenomenon. 2, trying to build a house on top of a burning foundation, or trying to teach a tantruming child to read, or trying to get a freaking out dog to feel better while it's freaking out doesn't work. First, stop the issue, knowing you won't make it worse, then work on creating new feelings. Once the fire is out, you could build something pretty awesome. So again, we went through that misleading part. Now, a lot of this stems from, I think the first couple things was creating a negative association by correcting around one of these triggers, right?
Yeah.
Same with that. I think we kind of all know the dog is having a negative association. I think the problem is people are nervous that they will create worse of an association with that,
okay. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Which is why in a lot of these cases, depending on what the specific thing is, we try to spend the time making sure the dog understands the correction is for the behavior that they are doing, not the miscellaneous thing.
Yeah.
Right? And a lot of that comes from us attaching the correction to us, right? So that's why we use verbal markers. That's why we tell the dog what we're correcting them for in that moment. And that's why we're an active part of the process. Because let's look at this strategically, because I like looking at stuff like this and kind of playing devil's advocate and like looking at, okay, cool, the opposite argument. How can we discuss that and explain how it may be true sometimes and how to avoid it, right? Okay. Let's take the example of dog reactivity, right? I'm walking my dog, right? And, they're freaking out at another dog, and I tell them no and give them a correction for it. Or my dog is playing with another dog, and they mount the other dog, and I tell them no and give them a correction for it, right? My dog is going to understand that I'm telling them that thing you're doing right now is giving you a correction. Now let's take the example of 2 dogs are just in a room together. There's no humans present or anything. And every time the dog walks by another dog, some out of nowhere an e-collar correction happens, right?
Yeah.
And nobody's connecting it to the behavior. It's inconsistent, and it's every time they walk near the dog. That will create a superstitious association with being near that dog and get them starting to think maybe that dog is what's correcting me, right? Same deal with a trash can. Let's look at things we want to create a superstitious association with. Let's say I'm outside, because I've done this trick before with my dogs when they used to get in the trash can. Let's say they're outside. I'm outside. My dog's inside. I have the e-collar on and I have it set all the way up. And anytime they go near the trash can, I give them a really high correction with the e-collar. At some point, they're going to think that trash can kind of bit them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's
So they're going to start to keep some distance away from it. Now, in a situation like that, I don't really have a problem with that. Or let's say we're working to teach neutrality around, I worked with a client recently that has like a sick elderly dog, and their one dog won't leave that dog alone, right? So we started enforcing a perimeter around that dog. If the dog goes within that perimeter, we give a correction, right? Is that dog potentially creating a negative association with, like, I don't want to be near that dog? Maybe, but we have to have that. The dog needs to leave the dog alone because the dog is in really, really poor health, right? That's not going to create fallout later on or anything. Don't worry about that. The dog will just realize that they need to creep a perimeter past those things, right? So, correct kind of, but again, we always spend time making sure we're correcting for specific behaviors, right? Or in the case of reactivity, a sit command, right? We work on a sit command, dog breaks that sit command, we tell them no and correct for that so they understand clearly it's not the other dog, it's the position, right?
Yeah. So in those scenarios that you were speaking of, like with the trash can, you were giving no like clear definition that you were doing. It was just when they would get in the vicinity, it was just...
They would get close enough to it where they were kind of contemplating it.
Yeah, but you weren't being like, no, and then you were just...
You could, right? Yeah. But if I'm outside and they're inside, they need to know if I'm not present that correction is going to happen as well.
No matter what, okay.
Yeah. That's why they sell like this thing called the pause away system, which I think is really cool, where it's got like a centralized thing that you set somewhere and it creates like a perimeter around it, where if the dog steps within that perimeter, they get corrected.
Oh,
that's
cool.
Something that's used for things like that.
Yeah.
Like stopping trash can, or a lot of people will use them with their Christmas tree. They'll put it under their Christmas tree to keep the dogs away from it.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's burn through the rest of this here. We got a couple more pages. I know we're always talking about what works best and what tools are best and what training approach is best, but we haven't talked much about when it's best to stop. Here's what I mean. When you're teaching your dog a new behavior or working through a problem issue, there always comes a time when you should stop. The problem is knowing when. It can be easy to see a dog mildly stressed with learning, a bit of confusion, and then throwing in the towel. Now, that might be the right choice, or it might be that you are climbing the mountain and almost to the top, but then stopped, and will possibly have to start over again at the bottom. This is especially true for working to extinguish problem behaviors more so than teaching a new exercise. Unfortunately, I can't tell you when the right moment to stop is, or whether continuing might offer the breakthrough you're looking for. All I can do is make some suggestions. When teaching sit, down, place, recall, heel, it's always preferable to stop on a great moment. But sometimes these moments aren't obvious, or our dogs are struggling and there's no great moment to be found. When you've got a ton of dog experience, you tend to be able to read when it's worth continuing and when it's time to say whoa. But when you're starting out or have limited experience, it can be really hard to read. When you start to see your dog moving backwards in the learning process, making more mistakes than progress, I'd stop. If your dog is looking frantic and wide-eyed, I'd stop. If the tongue is spatulate, I'd stop. When you're stressed, frustrated, or annoyed, I'd stop. Look for mental or physical fatigue from either you and look to stop before that happens. It's obviously a nuanced and complex situation, but I at least want all of you thinking about stress levels and how much too much pressure can inhibit learning rather than enhancing it. Of course, never pushing your dog's comfort zone is also counterproductive. Finding the balance and being super sensitive and strong is the magic balance point.
How'd you feel about that?
It just depends on what you're working on. I mean, I think that the one I definitely agree with is if you're getting frustrated, like, take a break, right?
Yeah.
At this point, I would say, like, I've developed a very, very high patience level where, like, not a whole lot will stress me out and I could really work through a lot of confusion and stuff like that and be good. But I would say once every couple months or so, I'll be working with a dog and I'll just catch myself being like, Jesus Christ, will you get it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like 9 out of 10 times, you know, I have to like be like, all right, cool, I'm just going to take a break right now and we'll jump back into this later.
Yeah.
And usually when I do that, it's always the right choice. The next session, I'm able to come through more clear-minded. I may be able to spot some sort of mistake that I was making or something, and it's a much more productive session after that.
Yeah.
For a lot of other things, though, as far as the stress and stuff like that, this comes into what are you working on, I think, more so than anything. And again, in Shawn's case, because a lot of it is so heavy-handed e-collar related, yes, a lot of those situations, it would be a very good idea to stop because I think you can do a lot more harm than good if you're really just like getting on the dog's case repeatedly. But I always say, like with a lot of dogs that we work with, there are certain situations we run into. Let's say another session I did yesterday, right? Working with this 6-month-old dog or whatever. We've done a lot of food training with the dog up until this point. We started introducing the e-collar, and we're working to finish off a lot of these commands, right? So with that dog, I specifically said this session, we're not going to use the food, right?
Yep.
Because I want to see once the dog realizes that's not coming, what their attitude kind of looks like with things, right? So we work the dog like 20 minutes. Dog is doing perfect. Then finally starts making some mistakes. We need to give some corrections, and we start seeing some confusion set in, right? So I specifically made sure that we worked through that confusion and we continued addressing what we needed to address and stuff like that until we got to that breakthrough point where essentially, like he said, climbed the mountain, right? Where the dog was performing successfully. Then we ended on that note, right?
Oh, yep.
So it's so situational, but I would say if you're teaching something new, if you're level-headed about things and you know it's just confusion and you're not really needing to drill the dog over it because it's confusion, you wouldn't need to do that.
Yeah.
I think it's more often than not, define success in your head, what that's going to look like, whether it's we get 3 repetitions in a row and work the dog past that point. I've had so many sessions with dogs before that have been an hour long, an hour and 15 minutes long of working on the same thing over and over again.
Yep.
And as long as you can confidently say what I'm doing is correct, right? What I'm doing will achieve the result I'm looking for. At some point, the dog is going to get it. And you have to have a realistic expectation of what that success looks like. Like I said, typically in my case, it's like, let's get 2 to 3 repetitions right now. 2 to 3 repetitions in a row, then we're going to end on that. You'll hit that point eventually, right? But it comes down to being fair with that expectation and making sure that you know what you're doing is accurate. Like it's going to achieve the result in the long run. And that comes down to understanding learning theory like we talk about, right? Some of these concepts are tried and true and it will work eventually and you kind of got to tough through it sometimes. So...
Makes sense.
All right. Next, the art of not caring about dog training. There's an interesting thing that great dog trainers do when working with clients that are struggling with their dog. And what is this thing? Man, I'm blowing up today. They work to get their client to not care about the training. They work to take their client's mind off of dog training. That's right. Instead of getting an owner to focus more intensely on dog training, they go the other direction. They work hard to get the owner to think about anything else but their dog. Now, this might sound like it would be counterproductive, but when we hyperfixate, overfocus, and put too much pressure on ourselves, a whole bunch of stuff transpires. We get into that overfocused, fixated place. We lose our relaxed body language and become tense. Our breathing changes. We release stress hormones that our dogs smell. We unconsciously apply tension to the leash. Our muscles lose their relaxed elasticity. Our minds become stressed and start making poorer and poorer choices. We tighten up. We go from natural unconscious movement to highly conscious movement, which is always bad. We start to anticipate issues and telegraph that to our dogs through our minute or overt reactions. By focusing too hard on training and all our actions in it, we end up messing the whole thing up. Like anything we try too hard at, we lose our naturalness. All of these moments start in our minds. They start with our thoughts, our fears, our worries, our anticipating, our focus. And even when we may be doing all the mechanics right, meaning we're correcting when we should correct, using space as a buffer, using enough pressure to be vulnerable to our dogs, telling ourselves to stay relaxed and utilize the tools as instructed, our minds have already betrayed us. And this mental betrayal can easily override all the good stuff you're actually doing. That's really the secret. You can't use all the mechanics and be successful without also using the right mindset. One empowers or disempowers the other. It's all about figuring out how to remove pressure from yourself rather than add it. So that's why many great trainers will work hard to get their clients to talk about anything else but training. They'll tell them jokes, ask them about work or family. They'll get them talking, and more importantly, thinking about something else. Once the mind lets go of the battle at hand and stops worrying and freaking out, it's free to relax, access its best stuff, and of course cause your body to respond similarly. Now, that doesn't mean we just walk out willy-nilly and not care about the training. It's really a tightrope walk. It's this magic space where you're highly conscious of what your goals are, but you're also allowing your mind and body to work in their better automatic state. The magic space of awareness without mental micromanagement and hypervigilance. Caring a lot without caring too much. And I call it a magical space because it's just that. But it takes work to find this space. Even if you're not working with a professional trainer, You should take a friend out on a walk with you and keep you relaxed and not overly dog-focused. You could work on positive self-talk, meaning keeping yourself light and easy, reminding yourself that it's just dog training, remembering to keep things in perspective, mentally allowing yourself and your dog to be okay to screw up. Giving yourself and your dog permission to be imperfect can be a huge gift. You could replay in your mind your favorite comedy movie, meditate before the walk, anything that helps keep you in an easy and relaxed so it can do its best stuff. And if you can keep your mind at ease, which will keep your body at ease, while simultaneously doing the mechanics right, you'll likely see a dramatic change in your dog's performance.
It's a lot of words to say chill.
Okay, yes. Yeah. Long stories, TLDR, just chill while you're doing it.
Yeah.
Right? Listen, easier said than done. I understand.
Oh,
we
yeah.
do try to get our clients to loosen up a little bit. I think the key is we need to get them to loosen up so they can process the information we're giving them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because here's the thing. When you're working with your dog, I want you to hyper-focus on it, right? I want you to fixate on the things that I'm asking you to focus on, and I want you to make sure you're doing it super, super, super correct. But
Yeah.
if you're too tense all the time, what's going to happen is you're not going to listen to me. I think that's the real problem with this, right? I'll see
Yeah.
people that are so focused on what they're doing with their dog and doing it correctly that they're not listening to the information I'm giving them.
Yeah.
Where in those cases, I think it's usually best where I'll like, all right, we're going to stop for a minute. Hold on. Wait.
Yeah.
Right? And then we reiterate our point and then we get them to focus back in on it, right?
Yeah.
Again, looking at the root of the problem here, though, again, more places where I kind of disagree a little bit here. The root of the problem here is the stress, right? Now, how do we work through stress? Sure, you can get them to loosen up, but right when they go to start doing it again, if they're doing it incorrectly, they're going to get stressed.
Stressed. Right.
It's going to happen. It's going to go
Yeah.
back and forth like that.
Yeah.
Right. So what I would rather do is loosen them up initially so they could hear what it is that I'm going to be presenting to them.
Yeah.
And then get them to do it correctly. Right.
Yeah.
And the second they start doing it correctly, they start realizing, okay, this isn't as hard as I thought. And then they start decompressing. It's the same shit as how we talked about with the dogs, pushing them past their comfort
Yeah.
zone. Right.
Yeah,
Once
exactly.
the dog starts doing the irrational, stressful thing
Yeah.
correctly a couple times,
It's good.
it starts going away. They start chilling
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
Right? So listen, you can look at it whatever way you want, but that's kind of how I look at that. Mm-hmm. All right, last page. The checklist. Here's a quick little checklist that we utilize here at TGD that we believe if you adhere to it, you can make amazing stuff happen with your dog. 1, personal mindset. We all know that what we carry around and share with the world impacts those around us. There's not getting by.
No.
There's not getting by this one. If you're emotionally a mess, if you're needy, dependent, permissive, overly anxious, constantly stressed, frustrated, or struggle with anger or patience issues, you're likely going to have a very hard time with your dog. That doesn't mean you have to be perfect. None of us are. We're all a mess from time to time. But if it's a chronic, ongoing, dysfunctional, or toxic state you're sharing, it's going to affect your dog. Along with that, being in a compromised state will make it exceptionally hard for your dog to listen, respect, and give you his or her best stuff. People in a bad space struggle to have their dogs follow them. You don't have to be perfect, but you do have to be honest and working on it. The right tools, number 2. While the tools you're using is a personal choice, this is the TGD list, so we'll share what we find to be the most helpful and effective. We use e-collars for interior work, off-leash hikes, excursions, and for walks. Think of the e-collar as the invisible leash and one that allows you to communicate with your dog up to a mile away. We also use prong collars. We use prongs for teaching basic obedience as well as for extra safety, control, direction on walks. We also use food and play and affection as a part of our training process when appropriate. Remember, a well-trained, reliable, and safe dog gets to enjoy a much bigger and more fulfilling and including life. 3, training approach. We believe humans should be in charge. We're unapologetic about this stance. We believe much of the problem behavior stems from this leadership vacuum. We subscribe to a less is more training approach. We don't do fancy. We use a short list of commands. We've built a training approach on real-life success. This means the training has to deliver results, and it has to be simple enough and practical enough for owners to incorporate into everyday life. Much of the training is passive, meaning the focus is more stationary work than constant action work. We also focus much more on calm and cool behavior than we do high-energy, constant motion, overly alert dogs. 4, state of mind, comprehensive focus. Rather than going after symptoms and chasing a never-ending stream of issues, we go after the entire mindset of the dog by sharing believable leadership, training tons of calmness, cultivating massive impulse control, sharing valuable consequences for poor choices, removing stress and anxiety by creating clarity and an overall lifestyle. We address the whole dog, not just the symptoms he's sharing. Once you teach a dog how to truly relax, turn off when asked, be respectful, and to defer to humans on a healthy fashion, you'll see most issues disappear. 5. Exercise, play, and affection. You can't just have all work all the time. It all needs to be kept in balance. But these things should be done that your dog earns through great behavior, not just stuff he gets just because. The quickest way to send the wrong message to your dog and make positive changes super difficult is to offer this soft, fun stuff before you've created respect. Typically, when working to turn problem behaviors around and creating more healthy relationships, we go super light on this stuff, if at all, and slowly add it in as the dog and relationship progress. You absolutely don't want to share soft, affectionate, playful stuff with a dog in an unhealthy or disrespectful space. But as things progress, you could start to strategically share more of this stuff. Let good behavior earn good stuff. This is, of course, just an overview, but I hope it gives you some perspective on the big picture. We truly believe that if you can wrap your head around these 5 pieces of the puzzle, tweak and adjust, and do your best to actually put them into practice, you'd see massive changes in your dog and relationship. It's just dog training. We're not going to read these last one.
Yeah.
That's it. Good job, Shawn Osheas. So again, talked about hang on. Hang on. There we go.
There it is.
So we talked about a lot of this stuff. We read through a lot of passages of this book. I think it's a really good one. I definitely recommend owners read it and follow some of his stuff just to get some insight as far as his thoughts on things. Take some of it with a grain of salt, as we talked about in here. There are certain things I like, certain things that I don't like about what he does. I think for the most part, the things that you should be looking for from him in particular are the more human training side of things. The mindset related stuff, the understanding things, the making sure you're understanding, the being the better person that you need to be to help your dog out a little bit better. I think all that stuff is really important information to take from him. From a training standpoint, I don't think he's doing anything super incorrectly. I just think there are certain places where it's a little too, like I said, correction based with certain things. I don't know if there's as much thought into the why and the science behind some of the training that he's doing. But all in all, I think it's very good.
Yeah, I was going to say it seems very heavy e-collar.
Yeah, very much so. Which again, not the end of the world, but there are takeaways I think that you should take from it. So,
yes.
But yeah, it was good. We gotta end that on that because I gotta go do some lessons. Josh, any final notes?
No, that was a wonderful book over the course of like 7 podcasts, but
I think 3, if I'm not mistaken.
I feel like it was at least 4.
Maybe.
Potentially.
But, wow.
Yeah. No, it's a good book, and I'm glad we went through it because there's quite a few things that were great correlations to what we talk about almost every day on this podcast.
Yep.
So
I got a great next one we're going to start getting into.
Ooh, I'm excited.
Great next one. But we won't spoil that for you right now.
Ooh.
All right. Good stuff. Josh?
Josh Tobey Productions, Instagram, joshtobeyproductions.com. If you have a restaurant or anyone that you know that has a restaurant, I will do some photos for you. It's time to give back.
That's right. You got 3 weeks to take advantage of that.
Yep.
All right, guys. David the Dog Trainer, Miracle Canine Training, miraclecanintraining.com. Catch you next week.
Bye.